But at the same time, there is that other piece, the dangerous piece of masking and the toll that it takes on you. And from my specific experience, I masked for so long to the point where I drove myself to burnout.
An audience would like to know a little bit about your experience with masking versus skill building and mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. For masking for me, it's been a little bit difficult, I guess, to kind of piece out who I am underneath all of the mask that I have built up. And then I'm still really learning how to unmask and what that looks like for myself. But I think it has been and will continue to be a key part of who I am as a person and not something that I can fully separate from myself. There's something to be said about the safety of masking and the privilege of masking. It's not always something that everybody can afford to do. It's in work environments, in interactions with law enforcement. There are a lot of different cases in which an autistic person is quote unquote forced to mask for their safety and for their well-being. And it's not always, it's a privilege to be able to unmask and to be able to fully be myself in some spaces. And I'm hoping that the world is working to allow us to unmask a little bit more and create safer spaces for us to unmask more. But again, it's not always a possibility. So for me, it has allowed me to get through high school. It has allowed me to form social interactions. It has allowed me to hold jobs. But at the same time, there is that other piece, the dangerous piece of masking and the toll that it takes on you. And from my specific experience, I masked for so long to the point where I drove myself to burnout. And it doesn't sound like much of a word because neurotypical people do experience burnout as well. But for an autistic frame, burnout can be severely damaging. It can cause neurological changes. You can develop autoimmune disorders from it. I personally have experienced like a year of really bad health and physical health because of my feeling that need to mask and putting all of my energy into masking. It took quite a toll on me. And I think that's important to balance that safety aspect and that very real danger of having to mask all the time and just how exhausting that can be on an autistic brain. And I think more specifically to my experience, I've found that a lot of women on the spectrum tend to feel the need to mask more just due to female socialization in general. You know, we're expected to be a certain way and show up a certain way and perform a certain way. And from a very young age, I was taught that I had to be something that I didn't feel like I was. And so it's important for me to learn where those values come from and kind of piece out my values from ones that have been shoved on me by society or by people from like my upbringing, doctors, teachers, etc.
You should that we did a webinar last month that was primarily on the female experience, and we dealt a lot about this. When I think about your experience being late diagnosed, making autism a special interest, where clearly in that process of investigation you would have learned what masking is, seen how you were doing it, and learned about the impact on you. Did you struggle when you knew what it was doing, when you really knew what it was doing to you? Did you struggle still with unmasking? Did you worry that the benefits you had received from masking for so many years would go away? What was that like when you realized this is what I'm doing and this is what it's doing to me?
There was quite a bit of skill regression in discovering my mask and discovering how to unmask. I lost a lot of the skills, the social skills that I thought I had, and a lot of the abilities to do stuff that I was previously able to do. Like I said, it kind of coincided with that burnout and that skill regression from burnout as well for me. But I think that like understanding that it's something that I have to do, or it's going to eventually catch up to me in a way that I can't like work with anymore. It became imminent, I guess, to address the masking in a way where it was affecting my physical health and my mental health to the point where I was like, okay, I really need to work on this. And it was very difficult for me to take a step back from everything I was doing in my life. I'm very goal oriented, and I had this very clear vision of what I wanted for my future and when I was going to meet those goals and how I was going to meet those goals. And discovering I was autistic put a huge stop on that. And I really had to learn how to measure myself by a different stick and be okay with accepting that I might not be the person I thought I was going to be, and to try to redefine my goals based on what I knew and how I could handle them, and to really tell myself that it's not regression to focus on my health, that is priority. And if I can focus on my health and I can focus on unmasking, then I'll be better equipped to meet my goals that I wanted to meet, even if that means taking a few years from stepping back and taking a few years to reevaluate my goals and reevaluate my health.
So we could go on this topic all night, but we have a few more. But I think what would be very key for a lot of people to learn here, as they're hearing from you and seeing what where you're at in your journey, is how long would you say that process took? You said there was regression, and now I know everything is a process and a journey, but from the point of where you were diagnosed and you started learning about this, would you say that whole breaking down and coming back up and understanding where it fits was a year, 2 years? What would you say?
I would say it took me about a year, and I would say I'm still in the midst of that process, really. After discovering I was autistic, it everything in my life felt like it had changed. Everything in my life felt like I was seeing it through a different lens. School and work and my relationships, and so for me, it happened almost instantaneously, where everything just kind of shifted. It's so hard once you've discovered that to go back to the old way of thinking. But the coming to terms with it took significantly longer for me. And honestly, I'm still working on coming to terms with it. I still have that little neurotypical voice in the back of my head that says, you're behind and you need to catch up and all those things. And it's an ongoing battle with me with that acceptance work, that I am not going to be on the same path as everyone else. It's going to look a little bit different, and it's going to be difficult to accept that. And I'm still working on that now, I would say.
Really concrete idea for parents, maybe too, and clinicians, just because you just made me think about something that came to my mind. I think that, and Jane, tell me what you think about this. What if we taught masking as a skill or a set of tools that you could choose to put on when it serves you and take off when it doesn't, versus creating this mask that almost masking should not be your identity, right? We don't want to teach people. So for example, like if I'm teaching social skills to a client, I don't want them to think that they should feel a certain way or they should be a certain way. But if you want to accomplish this goal, here are some ways that you could do that. And I think that if we could, because the truth is, to a certain extent, and not to the extent that autistic people have to, we all have to mask and do mask. We all present a version of ourselves to society that, may not be 100% authentic. But I think when you go to therapy and we don't want our therapy to be teaching them to identify to be neurotypical, and that should be the goal. So a mask should not be someone's identity. It should be a set of skills and tools that they can use in service of what matters to them, to service their own identity, their own goals. And so I think if we can think of it like that, there should be more distinction between this is a skill you can use in service of bettering your life and furthering your own goals, versus this is who you should be. This is how you should think. This is how you should act. And I think that is a great way to navigate this balance.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it's that, like you said, it's very important in certain situations to be able to have those skills, in job situations, in school situations. But something that was kind of in the back of my mind while you were saying that was, it's so important to create a space at home where that person feels like they are fully able to unmask. for me, I felt the need to mask at school all the time. And I would get such good feedback from my teachers and my peers. She's so good. She's so quiet. She does great in school. I'd come home and it would be like a shaken up pop bottle. I would erupt all over my family. I was in a horrible mood. I would just feel terrible. And they'd be like, why are you like this here? And as soon as you come home, it's just like, you're just terrible, quote unquote. And it took me a really long time to realize that it's because I was holding all of that down all day. I didn't feel like I had the ability to express myself, and I needed a space, an environment that I felt safe being myself in. And that's why it's so important as a caregiver to be able to create that environment for the autistic person at home where they are fully able to be themselves. And that's why it's so important to not have that overcorrection and that shaming coming from parents and coming from home, because if you feel like you have nowhere to unmask, you have nowhere to be yourself, it can really, really build up.